"Smile for the cameras, soldier," she said, and the whole arena laughed before I had moved a muscle. I want you to understand where I was standing when those words found me. Behind the unmoving face most people only ever photograph, I was thinking about the weight of my rifle and the cut of my collar, and the fact that I had stood 10,000 watches and never once been asked to perform. I am a guardsman of the House of Verald. My post that night was the apron of a stage in the great glass-roofed atrium of the old court, where the kingdom's most famous singer had come to give a charity concert under the patronage of the crown. My orders were simple: stand, watch, do not move unless the safety of the event requires it. I had done harder things in my life than stand still, so I stood. And the woman the whole world adored pointed her microphone at me like a conductor's baton, and decided I would be the joke that warmed up her crowd. Her name on every banner draped from the atrium's iron ribs was Leora Vance. 26 years old, a voice the papers called a national treasure, a smile that sold out stadiums in an hour. She had walked out for her encore in a long silver coat, barefoot, the way she always finished her shows, and somewhere in the middle of a song the band had let drop to a hush, she had spotted me. One red-coated guardsman at the edge of her spotlight, bearskin tall, white gloves still, eyes fixed on the middle distance the way they are trained to be. To 3,000 paying guests, I must have looked like a prop the palace had wheeled in for atmosphere. "Look at this one," she said, drifting toward me with the easy gravity of someone who has never once been told no. "He hasn't blinked the whole night. Have you, sir?" The crowd laughed again, warmer now. She was good. I will give her that from the first minute. She knew exactly how to make a room love her, and she did it by finding the one fixed point in it and gently, charmingly, deciding to knock it over. I kept my eyes forward. That is the entire art of it, you understand. Not the rifle, not the boots, not the medals. The art is the eyes. You give the storm nothing to grip. "They told me you can't move," she went on, circling now, the silver coat whispering across the boards. "Is that true? You'll just stand there no matter what I do." She turned to the crowd, mock conspiratorial, and the cameras swung with her. "Should we find out?" The arena roared yes. Of course it did. A famous woman had just offered 3,000 people permission to laugh at the man who isn't allowed to laugh back. There is a particular sound a crowd makes when it has decided someone is fair game, and I knew it well. I had heard it from drunks at the gate and from tourists with selfie sticks, and once, years ago, in a place very far from any palace, from men who thought a cornered unit would beg. It is the same sound every time. I have learned not to hear it as cruelty. I have learned to hear it as a test. So she began to perform me. "Attention," she sang, sliding into a melody, and a follow spot found me and pinned me in white. She marched a slow goose step in her bare feet, exaggerated, knees high, and the crowd clapped along. "Eyes front, chin up, don't you dare smile." She leaned in until I could smell the stage and the heat of the lights on her, and she dropped her voice to a stage whisper the microphone carried to every corner. "Come on, one smile, I'll even pay you for it." And there it was, the line that would follow her for the rest of her life, though neither of us knew it yet. I felt the old stillness settle into me like cold water. I have a way of leaving my body in those moments, of going somewhere behind my own eyes where the noise can't reach. I had gone there in worse rooms than this. I let her have her bit. A guardsman who reacts to a famous woman's teasing becomes the story. A guardsman who does not becomes the frame she dances inside. I knew which one I intended to be. But I will not pretend it didn't reach me. Not the laughter, the other thing. Because as she circled me a third time, mugging for the front rows, my eye caught the banner hanging behind the stage, the one I had been staring straight through for 2 hours without letting myself read it. The VANCE Foundation, it said, in letters 3 feet tall, and beneath, smaller, a night for the ONES, who stood for US. I had known the concert was a charity event. Every guardsman on the detail had been briefed. What I had not let myself think about, standing my post, was the name of the charity. The Vance Foundation. I knew that name. I knew it the way you know a scar you stopped looking at years ago. He's not going to give us anything, Leora announced, throwing up her hands, delighted. Folks, I think we've found the only man in the kingdom who doesn't love me. The crowd booed me, good-naturedly, 3,000 people pretending heartbreak. She blew me a kiss. Someone in the wings, a stage manager I'd clocked earlier, was waving frantically at her, but she was lost in it now, riding the warmth of the room, and a famous woman riding that warmth does not look to the wings. Last chance, she said, and she did the thing that turned the whole night. She reached up, slow and theatrical for the cameras, and with one finger she tapped the brim of my bearskin, tilting it the smallest degree off true. It is hard to explain to someone who has never worn the uniform what that touch is. She meant nothing by it. To her, it was a punchline, a tap on a toy soldier's hat. But a guardsman's bearing is not decoration. It is a vow you make with your whole body every hour that you will be the one thing in a chaotic world that does not give way. When her finger touched the cap, 3,000 people gasped and then howled with laughter, because the statue had been knocked just slightly crooked and still, would not move to fix itself. I did not move to fix it, I let it sit wrong. And behind my forward-fixed eyes, I made a decision that I had made 100 times before in my life and would stand by now, that the discipline was the answer, that she could have the laugh, that a man who has carried a stretcher under fire does not flinch because a singer tapped his hat. What I could not have known, in that white-pinned second, was that the line she would not stop crossing led straight back to the worst and best night of my life, that the foundation whose name hung over us both had been built on a list of names, and that mine was on it. But I am ahead of myself. Let me take you back to before the stage. Let me tell you why a guardsman of the House of Veralt was standing at the apron of a charity concert in the first place, and why, of all the men they could have posted there, it was me. I had not wanted the detail, I will be honest about that. I had asked my sergeant, a hard old soul named Reich who had served longer than I had been alive, to give the concert post to one of the younger men. It's a circus, Sergeant, I'd said. Lights and screaming, send the lads who like that. Reich had looked at me a long moment over his tea. Details set Halloran, he'd said. My name is Edmund Halloran, though the banners and the cameras never learned it. Crown's patroning a veterans' charity. They want steady men where the cameras are. And then, because Reich knew me better than anyone alive, he'd added, it's the Vance Girls Foundation. You know the one, stood up 2 years back, honors the ones who served. I had not answered him. I had simply gone and drawn my kit. Because I did know the foundation. Everyone did by then. 2 years earlier, Leora Vance had been a rising voice with one hit and a famous father, and the kingdom had loved her the way it loves the young and pretty. Then her father, a decorated colonel of the line regiments, had died, and grief had done to her what it does to the best of people. It had cracked her open and let something larger pour out. She had taken the money her records were making and built a foundation in his name to care for the soldiers her father had served beside. Veterans with no pensions, men carrying wounds the eye couldn't see, families of the fallen who'd slipped through every other net. The Vance Foundation. It had become enormous. It had become her great cause, the thing the papers admired even more than the voice. And in its first year, with great ceremony, the foundation had honored a list of veterans for what the citation called valor beyond the call, in the service of the realm. A list of names read aloud at a gala I had not attended. A list I had been told, by a letter I never answered, contained my own. I had not gone. I want to be plain about that because it matters to everything that came after. The Vance Foundation had written to me 2 years before that concert to tell me I was to be honored. There had been an action, years earlier in a hard country, where a unit I served with had been cut off, and I had done a thing that the army wrote up and the politicians liked, and that I have never once been able to think about without my hands going cold. Men had died. Men I'd carried had lived. The army gave me a medal I keep in a drawer. And 2 years before the concert, a grieving singers foundation had decided to give me a citation and a place of honor at a gala, and read my name to a ballroom full of strangers and call me a hero. I had written back 2 lines. I am grateful for the honor. I am unable to attend. And I had folded the letter into the drawer with the medal and gone back to standing my watches, because a watch is a thing you can do with your hands that does not require you to think about the men who didn't come home. So when Reich said the Vance Girls Foundation, something in me went quiet and resolved. I would stand that post. I would not be a coward about a concert when I had not been a coward about worse. I drew my kit. I marched to the atrium, and I took up my position at the apron of her stage, certain that the worst the night could do was bore me. I had stood my watch for 2 hours before she ever saw me. I had watched her sing to 3,000 people and watched 3,000 people fall in love with her, and I had thought, behind my still face, that her father would have been proud, and then I had thought of my own father, and then I had thought of nothing at all, which is the trick. I had watched a row of men in the front seats, men in suits with medals pinned crooked the way only old soldiers pin them, men her foundation had bussed in and seated up front, the honored ones, the ones the night was for. I had not let myself look at them too long. And then she had finished her last real song, and the band had dropped to a hush, and she had walked barefoot to the edge of her own light and found me. Now you know why I was there. Now you know what hung on the banner over us. So let me bring you back to the stage, to the white follow spot and the crooked cap and 3,000 people howling, and the famous, beloved, grieving young woman who had just decided that the funniest thing in her whole spectacular show would be the man at the edge of it who would not, could not, give her what she asked. She was not done with me. That is the thing about a crowd that has tasted blood, even gentle blood. It wants more, and a performer who lives on its love will feed it. Leora must have felt the energy in the room lift when she tapped my cap, and so she chased it. You know what, she said, spinning back to the audience. I read once that these guards are trained to ignore everything, fire alarms, tourists. Even when somebody, marches right up and gives an order. She turned to me, eyes bright, the showman fully in her now. I'm the patron of the realm's biggest veterans charity tonight. The crown's right up there in the royal box. I think that practically makes me a general, don't you? Laughter, a few cheers. She straightened, threw her shoulders back, and gave me a comically crisp salute, fingers wrong, elbow too high, a child's idea of a soldier. Soldier, she barked mock stern, and the word landed in me like a stone dropped down a well. I order you to smile. I held the line. Of course I held the line. But I will tell you what was happening behind the face, because that is the only thing I can give you that the 3,000 cameras could not. Somewhere far down in me, in the cellar where I keep the things I do not look at, that word soldier, barked as a joke, had found a door and was leaning on it. I had been ordered to do things by men who meant it, in places where the wrong answer got people killed, and I had obeyed, and I had also once refused, and the refusing had cost me more than the obeying ever did. A grieving girl in a silver coat playing general could not know any of that. She was not cruel. She was lonely on a stage in front of 3,000 people, and she had reached, the way the lonely do, for the one person in the room who would not flatter her, and she was trying to make him hers by force of charm. I understood her better than she understood me. That is usually how it goes. Nothing, she sang, delighted, almost tender now. Not a flicker. Oh, you are good. She came close again, and this time, instead of mockery, something flickered in her own face, a performer's instinct that she'd taken it as far as it would go and ought to land it warmly. Okay, I'll let you off, but I have to know one thing. She tilted her head, and for a half-second the famous mask slipped and I saw the tired young woman under it. Doesn't it ever get to you? Standing there, while everybody else gets to feel things. And that not the goose step, not the tapped cap, not the mock salute, that was the question that nearly broke my discipline. Because the honest answer was yes. The honest answer was that standing still while everybody else gets to feel things is the entire job, and I had chosen it on purpose, 2 years before, for exactly the reason she would never guess, that it was easier than the alternative. I gave her nothing. The crowd, sensing the bit was ending, began to applaud. She smiled, satisfied, and lifted her microphone to glide back into her encore. That was the moment it would have ended. A famous singer teases a stoic guard. The crowd loves it. The clip goes online. 1 million people watch the statue refuse to move, and that is the whole story. If the night had ended there, I would not be telling you any of this. But the night did not end there. Because the encore she swung into, the one she always closed her charity shows with, was a song she had written for her father. And halfway through the first verse, with 3,000 people swaying and the honored veterans in the front row sitting very still, Leora Vance looked down at those men in the front row, the ones her foundation had bust in, the ones the whole night was supposedly for, and she did a generous thing. She decided to bring one of them up. "This next part," she said over the music, "isn't about me. You see these gentlemen down front. My father served with men like them. My foundation exists because of men like them. And tonight I want to honor one of them properly." She was scanning the front row, and the spotlight swung off me at last and out into the seats, and the room warmed with the kind of applause that means a crowd has remembered why it really came. "I've got the list right here," she said, and a stagehand hurried out and pressed a card into her hand, the citation list, the names of the honored. "Let me find someone who couldn't make our gala, someone we owe and never got to thank to his face." I felt the cold start at the base of my spine. She read the first name. An old artilleryman in the third row stood to a roar, blinking, and she beamed at him and clapped, and the crowd clapped, and I thought surely that would be enough. Surely she would honor that one good man and move on. She read a second, a wife accepting for a husband who had passed. The room went tender. Leora wiped at her eye, unembarrassed, a young woman missing her father in front of the world. And then she ran her finger down the card, looking for one more, and she frowned, and she lifted the microphone, and she said the thing that stopped my heart inside my unmoving chest. "There's a name on here," she said slowly, reading, "that we honored 2 years ago and who never came, never answered. Our biggest citation that year, actually, Valor Beyond the Call. We always wondered what happened to him." She looked up, half laughing, half wistful, scanning the dark. "If he's out there, I'd love to know. The citation says he was a guardsman." The atrium was very quiet now. "A guardsman," she repeated, "and something, call it fate, call it a follow-spot operator with good instincts, turned the white light slowly back toward the apron of the stage. Back toward me." She read my name aloud. Edmund Halloran. She read it to 3,000 people and to the crown in the royal box and to the honored veterans in the front row, and she read it the way you read a name you've quietly wondered about for 2 years, and she had no idea, none at all, that the man it belonged to was the toy soldier she had just spent 10 minutes ordering to smile. I had not moved through any of it. I did not move now. But I will tell you that the cellar door I mentioned came off its hinges, and everything I had folded into a drawer 2 years ago and refused to look at was suddenly standing in the white light with me. Leora was still scanning the seats, hopeful, searching the wrong place entirely. "Anyone? Edmund Halloran." A nervous laugh. "No. Well, wherever you are, sir, you should know your country tried to thank you, and your country still." The old artilleryman she'd brought up first, the one still standing near the front, had been staring at me the whole time. Old soldiers see other old soldiers. He knew. He had read it in the way I stood, in the set of a man holding a line against something far heavier than a crowd, and his weathered face had gone slack with understanding. And before I could will it not to happen, before the discipline of 20 years could lock it down, that old artilleryman lifted one trembling, liver-spotted hand, and he pointed. He pointed straight at me. "That's him," he said. He wasn't near a microphone. He didn't need one. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the lights hum. That's Halloran. I'd know him in the dark. He carried me out. He carried 6 of us out. His voice cracked clean down the middle. That's the man your daddy used to talk about, girl. That's him. I have stood in rooms where men were deciding whether to kill me. I have stood in a wadi at night with a wounded sergeant on my back and counted the seconds between flares. I tell you the truth when I say the silence that fell on that atrium was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Leora Vance turned. Slowly, the way you turn when part of you already knows and the rest is begging it to be wrong. The microphone was still at her mouth, so the whole arena heard the small broken sound she made when her eyes came around and finally, truly, landed on the guardsman at the edge of her stage, the one she had goose-stepped past, the one whose cap she had tapped crooked, the one she had ordered to smile. The crooked cap was still crooked. I had not fixed it. 3,000 people watched her look at it and understand. No, she said, just that. Not into the microphone, really, to herself. The card with the names was shaking in her hand. I watched her look from the card to my face and back to the card, reading my name off it again as if the letters might rearrange themselves and spare her. They did not. Edmund Halloran, valor beyond the call, the guardsman who never came, standing 8 feet from her in a red coat she'd been treating as scenery. And here is where most people would expect the story to turn cruel. They expect the camera to pan to the famous woman's face as it crumples, expect the crowd to round on her, expect the kind of public ruin that the internet feeds on. I have watched that happen to people. I have stood at the gate and watched a mob form out of 3 laughing tourists. The room was one breath from it. I could feel the 3,000 turning, the warmth curdling, the love that had filled the atrium all night looking for somewhere to fall now that its object had been caught doing something shameful. Someone in the upper tier booed her. Then another. That is the thing about a crowd. It will adore you and then, in a single second, decide you are the villain, and it will not even feel the change. I had been the target of that crowd 10 minutes earlier. Now she was. And the strange, hard truth I had learned in 20 years of standing still while storms broke over me is that being the target teaches you exactly how it feels. And so I could not stand there and let it fall on her. She had not abused a child. She had not spat on me. She had teased a guardsman, the way half the kingdom's tourists do every single day. And she had done it not knowing that the man she teased was a name she had wept over in her own foundation's records. She was a grieving daughter who had built something good out of her grief, and she was about to be torn apart on a stage in front of the people she'd spent 2 years trying to honor, for the crime of not recognizing a face she had only ever seen as a number on a citation. I am a guardsman. My orders were to stand and watch and not move unless the safety of the event required it. The safety of the event required it. So I moved. I want to be precise about what I did because the precision was the whole point. I did not lunge. I did not speak out of turn. I did not break into a run or shout her down or do any of the things a man does when his pride has been touched. I came to attention, fully, deliberately, the loudest silent thing a guardsman can do, and the small mechanical snap of my heels on the boards cracked across that quiet arena like a rifle shot. 3,000 people flinched. The booing stopped. Then, in front of the crown, in front of the cameras, in front of the woman who had ordered me to smile and the old artilleryman still standing with his arm half raised, I turned a quarter turn to face the front row of honored veterans, and I lifted my white-gloved hand, and I rendered them a salute. Not her, them. I held it. I held it the way you hold a salute that means something. The way I had not been able to hold myself together to do at a gala 2 years before, and I watched the old artilleryman's face come apart, and beside him a row of men her foundation had gathered, men with crooked medals and canes, and the particular stillness of those who have buried friends rose, one by one, joints protesting, and returned it. An old woman in a black dress, a widow, stood with them and pressed her hand flat to her heart. The room did not know what it was watching, but it knew it was sacred. You can feel it when a crowd crosses from spectacle into reverence. The phones were still up. They are always up. But the laughing had drained out of the place entirely, and 3,000 strangers were on their feet now for a reason none of them could have named, applauding a salute between men most of them had never heard of. I lowered my hand. I turned my quarter turn back to my post, and only then did I let my eyes, for the first time all night, leave the middle distance and come to rest briefly on Leora Vance. She was crying, not the graceful single tear she'd shed for her father's song. She was standing in the middle of her own spotlight with the citation card pressed to her mouth and tears running down her face and her shoulders shaking. And she was looking at me the way I imagine I once looked at the men I couldn't carry out, with the specific grief of someone who understands, far too late, exactly what is standing in front of her. She lowered the microphone. The band had stopped. For a moment she just looked at me, and I looked back, and 20 feet of stage between us became the narrowest distance in the world. Then she did the thing that told me everything I needed to know about the woman under the fame. She walked to me, not for the cameras, she had turned half away from them. She crossed the boards in her bare feet, and she stopped in front of me close, and she reached up one more time toward my cap. The room held its breath, certain she was about to make it a bit again, to save herself with a joke. Instead, gently, with the back of 2 fingers, she straightened it. She set the bearskin true. She fixed the thing she had knocked crooked, and her hand was trembling so badly she had to do it twice. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. The microphone was down at her side, but it was still live, and her whisper went out across 3,000 people and the cameras and the crown and the whole watching kingdom. "I didn't know. I read your name 100 times. I cried over your file, and I didn't." Her voice failed. She tried again. "You carried 6 men out, and I made you the joke in my show." I did not answer. I was not permitted to answer, and even had I been, I do not think I could have. But I will tell you what I did, because it was the only thing I had to give her, and it was against every order I'd ever been issued. I looked her in the eye, and I let her see that I was not angry. That is all. A guardsman's face is a locked room, and I unlocked it for exactly 2 seconds and let one human being see that there was a man in there, and that he had forgiven her before she finished apologizing, because he understood better than anyone alive what it costs to carry a thing you didn't choose. Her father had carried it. She was carrying it now, in the shape of a foundation. And I had been carrying mine for 20 years behind a still face at a palace gate. She stepped back. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand, smearing the stage makeup, and she did not try to fix it. Then she turned to the arena, and she lifted the microphone, and what she did next was braver than anything she'd done all night, because it was the opposite of a performance. "I want you all to hear me," she said, and her voice was raw and steady at once. 2 years ago my foundation gave its highest honor to a guardsman who didn't come to claim it. I used to think, I'm ashamed to say it, I used to think maybe he didn't care. Maybe the honor didn't mean anything to him. A long breath. I just spent 10 minutes of my show making fun of that man for standing still. And I'm only now understanding that standing still, for him, might be the hardest thing a person can do. The atrium was silent. Even the children of the night, the camera lights and the exit signs, seemed to dim. "My father used to come home from his service and not speak for days," she went on, and now she wasn't reading a card, she was telling them the thing under the foundation, the thing under the songs. And I never understood it. I thought he was somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach. And tonight I finally understand where he was. He was standing still. He was holding a line none of us could see, so that the rest of us could feel things without ever having to carry what he carried. She turned and looked at me, and the spotlight caught us both. "These men don't want our applause, do they? I think they'd actually rather we never saw them at all. I think that's why he never came to the gala, because the gala was for us. The standing is for them." I will not tell you that she was entirely right, but she was close enough that it took the air out of me, behind my still face. I had told myself for 2 years that I hadn't gone to the gala because honors were not my way, because a watch was easier than a ballroom. The truer thing, the thing I had never once said aloud, was that I could not bear to stand on a stage and be called a hero in the name of an action where I had carried 6 men out and left 2 behind. There were 8. The citation said 6. Everyone always says 6. No one ever asks about the 2. And I had decided, a long time ago, that I had no right to a citation that didn't carry their names too. And so I had folded the letter into a drawer and never answered it, because to accept the honor felt like accepting that 6 was the whole story, and it was not. I had never told anyone that. I have only ever told it to this still page now. But standing in that white light, watching a grieving girl tell 3,000 strangers the truest thing about the men her father served beside, I felt something I had not felt in 20 years. I felt that the 2 were not forgotten after all. Not by me. Not somehow by her. "I'd like to do something," Leora said, "and then I promise I'll let this good man get back to his post, because that's what he wants and he's earned the right to want it." She walked to center stage. "The gala citation he never got to hear, I have it here, and I'd like to read it, not to embarrass him, to finish something my foundation started 2 years ago and never got to close." She lifted the card, and in a voice that no longer had a single note of performance left in it, she read the citation aloud. She read about an action in a hard country, recast in the plain language of these things: a unit cut off, a position overrun, a guardsman of the line who had gone back across open ground not once but 3 times to bring out the wounded, who had carried men on his own back through fire, who had refused evacuation until the last living man was clear. The army's words. Stiff, formal, true as far as they went. The crowd listened to all of it in absolute stillness. And when she reached the end, she did not stop where the army stopped. She looked up from the card, and she looked at me, and she added a line that was not in any citation, that she had no authority to add, that she added anyway because she had understood the one thing about me that the army never wrote down. "And we honor, too," she said quietly, "the ones he could not carry, because I don't think he ever let himself be honored without them." I broke. "I want to be honest with you about that, because I have spent this whole account telling you how I did not move, and now I have to tell you that I did. Not much. A guardsman's breaking is not another man's. I did not weep or stagger or speak, but my throat worked once visibly, and my eyes, fixed for 2 hours on the middle distance, closed. For 1 full second, in front of 3,000 people and the crown and the cameras, Guardsman Edmund Halloran closed his eyes. And when I opened them, there was wet on my lashes that the follow spot caught and turned to silver, and every person in that arena saw the statue feel something, and not one of them laughed. That was the moment the night had been building toward, though none of us had known it. Not the mockery, not the reveal of who I was. This. A young woman who had built a house for grief out of her own, reaching across a stage to honor not just the man who lived but the men who didn't, and a soldier who had locked that grief away for 20 years finally, for 1 second, setting it down where someone else could help him hold it. The applause, when it came, was not the applause of a crowd that has been entertained. It rose slow and enormous and did not stop. 3,000 people stood. They were already standing, so they stood taller, and they turned, many of them, away from the famous singer and toward the guardsman at the edge of the stage, and they gave me the thing I had spent 2 years refusing, and this time I could not refuse it, because it was not for me alone. It was for the 8. The 6 who walked out and the 2 who didn't. She had made it for all of us. That was her gift, and it was a better one than any citation. I came back to attention. I returned my eyes to the middle distance, and I stood my post, because that is what I was there to do, and a guardsman does not leave his post for applause any more than he leaves it for mockery. The 2 things weigh the same to a man who has learned to carry both. Leora finished her father's song. She sang it differently than she had ever sung it. I think slower, with the bravado gone out of it, the way you sing something when you've just learned what it actually costs. And when the last note faded into that great glass roof and the lights came up, she did not take her bow at center stage. She walked back to the apron to me, and she stood beside the guardsman for her final bow, One bare foot turned slightly toward me, sharing the light she had spent her whole career learning to keep for herself. What happened after the house lights came up belongs in the account too, because it is the part that lasts. The royal box had been watching, of course it had. The crown's patronage was the reason the cameras were there, the reason a guardsman of the House of Veralt was posted at a concert at all. And before the arena had finished emptying, an equerry came down from the box, threading the aisles in a quiet dark suit, and he did not come to Leora. He came to me. He stopped a respectful pace away, the way men do when they are about to deliver something that matters, and he said, low, that the patron of the evening had asked him to convey a single message to the guardsman at the stage. The message was 4 words: "You should have come." I understood it. It was not a rebuke. It was an invitation 2 years late reopened. The Crown had read my file once, the way the Foundation had, and had wondered the same thing the singer wondered, and now, having watched what the cameras caught, had decided that the matter was not closed. That the honor I had refused was still mine whenever I was ready to claim it, and that I should claim it, for myself and for the two. I gave the equerry my answer, and I will give it to you because it is the closest thing to a creed I have. Tell the patron, I said, and it was strange to use my voice after a night of silence, strange and good, that I'll come to the next one, and that I'll bring 2 names that weren't on the citation and ask that they be read. He inclined his head. He understood. He went back up to the box, and I never learned exactly what was said there, but I know that the following spring, at the Vance Foundation's gala, 2 names were read aloud that had never been read at any honors anywhere, and that a guardsman stood in a ballroom in his dress uniform and did not look away while they were spoken. But that is a different night, and this account is about the concert. I saw Leora Vance one more time before I left. The arena was nearly empty, the crew rolling cable, the banners coming down from the iron ribs, a night for the ONES who stood for US folding in on itself. She found me at the stage door in my coat, off post now, just a tired man in a red uniform going home. She had wiped her face and put her shoes on, and she looked, suddenly, much younger than her stadiums, much closer to the grieving daughter than the national treasure. I'm going to get torn apart online for tonight, she said. She didn't sound afraid of it. She sounded resigned and a little wry. They'll clip the part where I order you to smile and they'll never show the rest. Some of them will, I said, and the ones who matter will show all of it. She studied me a moment. You forgave me before I even finished saying sorry. Up on the stage, I saw it in your face. How? I thought about how to say it. I am not a man of many words. The job has worn most of them off me. But she had earned an answer, so I gave her the truest one I had. Because the worst thing that happened to me tonight, I said, was being seen, and you didn't do that to hurt me. You did it to honor men like me. You just aimed it at the wrong soldier first. I almost smiled then. Almost. I've taken worse aim than yours from people who meant it. She laughed, wet and surprised. Then she put out her hand, plain, a person to a person, and I took it, and that was the only contact between us all night that wasn't part of anyone's show. Will you tell me their names? She asked quietly. The 2, I'd like to carry them too, if you'll let me. And I did. I stood at a stage door in an emptying arena, and I said 2 names out loud that I had not let myself say in 20 years, 2 men who had not come back across the open ground with me, and I watched a famous young woman receive them the way her father must have taught her to receive such things, without flinching, without performing, holding them like something that could break. She wrote them on the back of the citation card. She told me later they are engraved now in the Foundation's hall, under all the others, where they belong. Then I put on my cap straight true, the way she had said it, and I went home. People ask me, when they recognize me now, whether I was angry that night, whether it stung, being made the fool in front of 3,000 people by a woman who didn't know me. And I tell them what I have come to believe is the whole truth of it. A guardsman is trained to be the one thing in a chaotic room that does not move. We hold the line so that everyone else doesn't have to. And most days that is a lonely thing and a thankless one, and you tell yourself the stillness is its own reward because no other reward is coming. But every so often, once in 20 years maybe, the line you hold holds someone back to you. A girl in a silver coat mocks the statue, and the statue turns out to be a name in her own grief. And in the turning, two soldiers who were nearly forgotten get spoken aloud in front of the whole kingdom, and a man who'd locked his heart in a drawer finds someone willing to help him carry it. I did not flinch when she ordered me to smile. I am proud of that. It was the job and I did the job, but I am prouder of the thing the cameras almost missed. That when the crowd turned on her, the man she'd mocked was the one who stood between her and them. That is the whole of it, I think. The discipline was never about not feeling. It was about choosing, every hour of every watch, what to do with what you feel. I went back to my gate the next morning. Bearskin tall, white gloves still, eyes forward. The same statue the tourists photograph. And if you walked past me today, you would never know that anything happened, or that a famous woman once tapped my cap crooked and then set it straight again, or that two names are carried now that weren't before. But I would know, and that is enough. That has always been enough. That is the whole point of standing still.